Sakuri was an ordinary university student. Since he activated the mysterious system, he gained a unique ability, the power to acquire a new identity every week. He could become anyone, for example, the president of a large corporation, the best assassin in the world, or a brilliant visionary. If he needed to cook something delicious, he could easily become the god of cuisine. He could even take on the identity of a rebellious alien tasked with uniting civilizations. Of course, having to change identities every week irritated him a little, but on the other hand, who wouldn't want to live such an exciting life, crossing 4 oceans, traveling the entire world, seizing control of the universe, or even earning the title of king? It was a life not everyone could handle, but the main character was ready for it. For now, though, he had to return to reality. It was just another normal day at the university. However, during one class, a fight broke out. A classmate laughed at Suri, mocking him because he thought Suri was nothing more than a thug from 18th Street. The school bully, Eric, ridiculed him, saying Suri received more pocket money in a day than Eric spent in an entire year. Eric threw a stack of money at him and told him to stay away from Lucy, his girlfriend. His friends supported him. No one could understand why Sue dared to fight for the most beautiful girl in the class, especially since Eric's uncle was the vice-chancellor. The whole class hated Sue and called him a beggar. Suddenly, Mr. Lee, an executive from an international corporation, entered the classroom. Everyone recognized him because just yesterday the professor had told them about an incident that happened in his company. No one understood why one of the leaders of the powerful King Corporation would come to their school. At that moment, Mr. Lee and his men bowed to the boy who was being ridiculed by the entire class. Everyone was shocked and confused. The teacher tried to say it must have been a mistake since Seung was just a poor student from a small town, but Mr. Lee told her to shut up because Seung was the sole heir of the King Corporation. Eric was horrified. He could not understand how this beggar could be the heir of an international company. At that moment, Seo struck him, saying, "A goose is no friend of a pig." He then walked over to Lucy, the most beautiful girl in the class, hugged her, and unexpectedly kissed her. Lucy didn't know what to say, but then Seo told Mr. Lee it was time for them to leave. Together they walked out. Lucy was embarrassed but also secretly happy. Eric, on the other hand, cried, unable to accept his defeat. No one understood how Seo had gone from a poor man to a rich heir. Just 20 minutes ago he was nothing more than a bad student. That very morning he had read the news that the president of King Corporation had died in a car accident. Seo had been saddened by the news but also wondered why he cared so much. Suddenly the class president, the same Lucy, threw a newspaper at him. His friend George mentioned that many people in the classroom were on their phones, but for some reason, Lucy only paid attention to Seo. She confessed that she had liked him since first grade, but he never responded because he didn't care. George reminded him that many people envied him, but Seo didn't like it. The truth was, Seo couldn't start dating Lucy because he had no money. At that moment, a powerful system activated in his mind. It told him that he could change personalities every week. By activating and completing a new mission, he would gain a random skill. That was how he had acquired the identity of the president of the King Corporation. On the surface, he was still just an ordinary student, but in reality, he was also the sole heir of the King Corporation, after the death of its president. Today, Seo officially took over that position. He had gained personality traits such as business vision, leadership, and a calm temperament. He was tasked with uncovering the true cause of the president's death and confronting the vice president. Suddenly, the teacher ended the lesson and Seo woke up abruptly, realizing it was just a dream. At that moment, Lucy approached him angrily, asking why he was ignoring her. He tried to avoid the conversation, but Eric suddenly came up again, reminding him not to get close to Lucy. That was when the fight mentioned earlier broke out. Seo became convinced that his mind had indeed received a new identity. Even the memories that other people had of him seemed to have changed. Meanwhile, the assistant of the company's vice president told Seo that Mr. Lee had already returned from Seo's school, adding that his people had been slightly delayed. The assistant sneered that nothing could be done because Sue was just a child who knew nothing. Later, he revealed to Sue that Shan was the vice president. After the president's accident, Shan had been the first choice for the new president. However, because Mr. Samuel had left all his shares to Sue in his will, Shan was not eligible to become president. Now Sue understood why the vice president hated him so much. The system then gave Sue 1 month to uncover the true cause of Samuel's death. Sue began to suspect Shan. Mr. Lee told him that Shan was known for his cruelty and had many enemies, even among the powerful. All the higher-ups had mysteriously disappeared. Then a man warned Sue to be careful, reminding him that he was still just a student. Sue wanted to meet Shan personally, so he told all the members of the board of directors to gather at the main entrance. While Sue went to buy milk tea, the board members waited outside and grew very angry with him. But one man asked them to calm down, saying this was the order of the new company president. However, they argued that the new president had no ability or qualifications. How could he possibly become president? Why couldn't Chan take the position instead? Some employees agreed, saying they also wanted Chan to be the company's president, but the older staff members opposed them, insisting that since President Samuel had only recently passed away, the heir chosen in his will must be respected. Suber heard the conversation and thought about removing them once he became president. After a while, Sub finally appeared. He was dressed in an expensive tuxedo and held a glass of wine in his hand. Chan greeted him warmly, introducing himself as his deputy, but Sue told him he already knew everything he needed to about him. One of the employees saw the milk tea in Sue's hand and mocked him, saying he should go back to university and continue playing computer games, because business was war and he didn't belong here. Sue smiled and asked what kind of dog was standing behind Chan. Furious, the man tried to defend the employee, but before he could say another word, Sue slapped him. Suizan declared that if a dog didn't belong to the deputy yet still dared to bark, it needed to be punished. He then scheduled a meeting in the conference room in 5 minutes. Chan grew angry, realizing this boy was not behaving the way he had expected, and decided to act equally arrogant. At the entrance, the newly appointed director was greeted by his secretary, Sua. Lee assured him that she was absolutely trustworthy, and that he could rely on her for anything. Sua then asked her to prepare 3 cups of tea for him, in the conference room. The secretary was puzzled as to why he needed 3 cups at once. 5 minutes later, all the board members were seated in the conference room. Sue introduced himself and declared that from today onward he was the president of the company. But before he could continue, one of the managers interrupted, bringing up the issue of inheritance. Suddenly Sue threw a hot cup of tea at him and told him to shut his mouth. The man was shocked. Didn't his parents ever teach him not to interrupt others? Sue then continued, firmly stating that from this day forward he was the company president. He asked those who opposed him to speak freely, saying he was willing to hear and get to know them, but everyone remained silent, too afraid to say anything. Lee was satisfied, glad that the late President Samuel had chosen Sue as his successor, although young Sue was already displaying great charisma. At that moment, Shan spoke up. He told Suer that he was still very young, but already showed great promise. With such a leader, the company would surely succeed. However, he added that the company employed tens of thousands of people, and convincing the managers alone would not be enough. If Suer could accomplish something incredible like closing a major deal with Thai Corporation, then no one in the company would ever doubt his abilities again. Lee immediately stepped in to defend Suer, pointing out that the Thais were their worst enemies. He couldn't understand how Chan dared to suggest that Suer sign a deal with them. Enraged, Chan threw a glass of water at Lee for daring to talk to him that way. At that moment, Sue picked up the glass of water and calmly announced that he would take on the project himself. Chan smirked, calling Sue very courageous, and asked if 1 month would be enough time to complete such a project. Sue boldly replied that 1 week would be enough, then ended the meeting. He instructed Sue to follow him. Lee tried to stop him, insisting that 1 week wasn't nearly enough for such a task, but after Sue left, Chan thanked Lee for bringing him there because now he could finally see this idiot with his own eyes. He and his advisors mocked the new president, while Lee's assistants couldn't understand why Samuel had chosen such a fool. They even considered leaving the company before it was too late. Later, after everyone had gone, Sue asked Lee to tell him how President Samuel had died. Lee explained that Samuel had suffered an accident, and the police had already ruled it as such, but Sue couldn't believe it. If it had truly been just an accident, then the system would not have forced him to investigate. Lee continued, saying that earlier that morning, Samuel had collided with a truck at an intersection and died. The truck driver had been collecting garbage at the same time every day, so the accident was not considered intentional. Sakuri then asked where the driver was now. Lee replied that the man had been detained and was currently at the police station. Sue immediately instructed Lee to go to the station and follow the driver. Lee was shocked, unable to understand why the president himself truly suspected something was wrong, yet he obeyed in silence. Unnecessary questions were ignored, and Sue immediately went to complete the task. In less than a few minutes, Sue brought him all the information about the president of Thai Corporation. His name was Anthony, and Sue immediately began studying the documents. The man's name felt strangely familiar. Suddenly, Sue saw a photo in the dossier. It was his classmate Lucy. She was the daughter of the president of Thai Corporation. Meanwhile, night had fallen. Lucy was sitting in her room drying her hair while her friends discussed Sue, who had suddenly gone from a loser to a successful person. Suddenly, Lucy noticed that Sue had sent her an SMS saying he wanted to see her. She was overjoyed. Quickly dressing, she told her friends she would be back soon and left the house. On the street, she looked around searching for Sue. Suddenly, someone hugged her from behind and called her beautiful. Startled and frightened, Lucy instinctively threw the man to the ground. When she realized it was Sue, she nervously checked if he was okay before asking why he had attacked her from behind. Sue asked her why she hit him whenever he approached her secretly but did nothing when he came to her openly and kissed her. Lucy blushed and timidly asked why he had avoided her for so many years but was now acting completely differently. Sakuri answered that before he had been poor and could not offer her a happy life, but now he was no longer that miserable boy. Now he was ready to give everything for her love. Lucy hadn't expected this. Tears of happiness filled her eyes because she had always thought So didn't love her. Sue wiped away her tears and then asked if it was true that her father was the president of Thai Corporation. Lucy replied that she had already told him 5 years ago. Her father had started his own business and founded Thai Corporation. Sue then said he wanted to establish himself in her father's company and would need her father's help. Just then, Sue received a phone call. He was informed that the truck driver involved in the accident had committed suicide. Sue was shocked but did not show it. He told the caller he would come immediately. Rushing, he told Lucy he would call her the next morning. She was upset, as she had never been able to fully express her feelings to him. In a hurry, Sue began crossing the street without looking. He didn't notice the speeding car rushing toward him. It was just 1 meter away when at the last moment, another vehicle struck its tires, changing its trajectory. The car that had tried to hit Sue quickly fled the scene. It turned out that Sue had been saved. The scarred man, Yin, stepped out of the car and asked if Sue was okay. Later, Yin reported to Chan that the driver could not have hit Sue because he had appeared suddenly and saved him. Chan replied that it wasn't important. He only wanted to scare Sue. He wasn't foolish enough to kill 2 company presidents at the same time. Meanwhile, Lee and Sue arrived at the office. Sue quickly realized it had been a warning. Someone wanted him to give up. Lee was furious. If he hadn't arrived in time, something terrible could have happened. Sue then asked Lee to tell him what had happened to the truck driver. Lee explained that the driver had indeed been under surveillance for a long time but had died suddenly while in detention. By the time he arrived, the man was already dead. The driver had left a note saying he had no money to pay for the damages, so he paid with his life. Sarah asked where the driver's family lived. Lee replied that the man had divorced years ago and lived alone. Sarah then instructed him to investigate further, reasoning that if someone had hired a killer, the leverage used to make the driver agree to such a fate could only come from a family member. Lee immediately stood up, saying he would look into it. Meanwhile, a new day began. The sun shone brightly over the houses. Mirai, Anthony's wife, scolded her husband for doing nothing but eating and showing no concern for their daughter. Anthony asked what had happened to Lucy. Mia replied that Lucy had been spending time with a boy every day, and last night Shane, her boyfriend, had waited for her all night but she never came home. At that moment, two young men came downstairs. One of them, Lue, asked his mother why she was shouting so early in the morning. The second, Shane, asked if Lucy had returned. Mia answered that Lucy would be back soon and told them to sit down for breakfast. Shane then said that if Lucy truly didn't like him it would be better for him to leave, but Lou insisted that as the boss Shane couldn't lose to some poor student who wasn't even worth his attention. Just then Lucy returned home, with Sue at her side. The entire family was shocked and couldn't understand what was happening. Sue introduced himself, saying he was Lucy's boyfriend. It was his first visit to their home, and he hadn't brought any gifts other than fruit. Lucy's brother was displeased, threw the fruit at Sue and told him to leave the house. Sue turned to Lucy's father, respectfully calling him uncle. He complimented the family, saying they were wonderful, but added that Lucy's brother was behaving very rudely. The man immediately told Sue to shut up. He said he admired Sue's business skills but asked why he had done something so reckless today. This was not good for his daughter, and Sue should have left. Sue was about to reply, but Shane interrupted, asking to say a few words. Shane introduced himself as the young leader of Sunshine Corporation, and claimed that he would soon be its president. The moment felt very familiar to Sue. He guessed Shane would now throw him a bank card. And indeed, that's what happened. Shane tossed a card at Sue's feet, saying it contained $1 million. He could take the money and leave. Sue didn't want to stoop to his level, so he just stood there, expressionless, staring at Shane. Lucy didn't understand why Shane was so eager to flaunt his identity today, since he usually didn't care about money and never bragged about being the leader of Sunshine. Shane answered that he only wanted to remind certain people of their humble positions, so they wouldn't dream of something beautiful they didn't deserve. Suddenly Sue picked up the bank card. Shane thought he was going to accept the money, but instead, Sue slipped the card into Shane's jacket and told him not to throw away the money his father had earned through hard work. Lucy's parents were shocked by Sue's behavior. Shane immediately grew furious. He shouted that it was none of Sue's business. After all, he was the young executive of a company worth $30 billion, and it was up to Lucy's parents to decide who was worthy of their daughter. Sue calmly replied that he was the president of King Corporation. The entire family and Shane were stunned. They never expected this nobody to be anyone of importance. Sue, slightly embarrassed, didn't look like a wealthy man at all. Shane refused to believe him, calling him a liar and insulting him. Just then, breaking news appeared on the TV. The report said that after the sudden death of the company's former president, a 19-year-old named Sue had inherited the position of president. King Corporation's market value was reported at $130 billion. Lucy's father was embarrassed as he also hadn't believed Sue could possibly be the president. Sue turned to Shane and said he would be happy to cooperate with him in the future. Feeling awkward, Shane muttered that he had urgent business and quickly left, slamming the door so fast that no one had time to say goodbye. Loie immediately hugged Sue, saying he had always seen him as a remarkable person. Mia invited Sue to sit at the table and promised to bring him food. When Sue sat down, he told Anthony he was there for business because his company hoped to cooperate with Thai Corporation. Anthony coldly replied that he would never in his life do business with King Corporation. Furthermore, a representative of that company had no right to discuss business in his house. Lucy asked her father why he was being so rude to Sue, but Anthony insisted that cooperation was out of the question. Sue said he had already sent people to investigate the reasons behind the conflict between King and Thai. Mia asked her husband why he couldn't do something good for his business, and then requested that Sue explain the situation. Sue replied that, according to his findings, something had happened when Anthony and Mr. Samuel were young, but Anthony didn't let him finish. Grabbing Sue's hand, he told him to shut up. He quickly stood and pulled Sue with him, saying he was ready to sign all the documents with him. With a dissatisfied expression, he added that Sue must never dare to mention this conflict in front of his wife again. Soon after, Chan learned that Anthony had signed a contract with Sue. He couldn't believe it. Dean told him that Anthony would make an announcement to the board of directors in 2 days, and asked what Chan thought about it. Chan replied that it made no sense. Tai had been enemies with King for a long time, so how could Anthony agree to a young boy's demands? The assistant suggested it might be because So had started dating Lucy. Chan grew furious and demanded why no one had told him such important information. His assistant replied that he had just found out himself. When asked if he wanted to pursue the matter, Chan said there was no need. So was just a child and he wouldn't panic because of him. Besides, he already had a plan to deal with him. At that moment, the system informed Sue that he had only 4 days left before the deadline. He needed to finish the task quickly. Sue was surprised, realizing that discovering the truth behind Samuel's death was far more important than signing any contract. Just then, Lee rushed in and told Sue he had uncovered something incredible. The truck driver had a daughter. 3 years ago, she had gone abroad to study, and since then he had started working as a driver at a construction site. Sue realized that the poor man must have gotten involved in something unusual after all. How could an ordinary truck driver suddenly... The man realized that the money to send his daughter abroad had come from somewhere unusual, and then So understood that the killer was very clever, because he had probably planned everything more than 30 years in advance. Lee agreed with him, since they still hadn't been able to trace the source of that money, and because the enemy was so cunning and ruthless, Lee hired bodyguards for So who would follow him constantly. He told Sue that now he had nothing to worry about, since all the bodyguards were elite special forces soldiers. Sue was pleasantly surprised, and thanked him for such a favor. He then asked all the bodyguards to step outside, because Sue still had a question for Lee. Lee took out a photo of all the company's directors and asked Sue who the tall man was, and why he hadn't attended the last meeting. Lee explained that the man was not a board member but rather someone very close to Shan. It was said that Shan entrusted most of his dirty work to him. Lee asked if Sue wanted to start investigating with him, but Sue replied that he was simply asking about the man's identity. At that moment, Suri was walking down the hallway when she suddenly saw Yan. He was standing by the wall and asked why she hadn't greeted him when they met earlier. The girl told him to stop following her around the company. He replied that he had urgent matters to discuss with her. He wanted to contact her outside the company, but she had ignored his calls. Suri explained that it wasn't her duty to help him. Suddenly, the man grabbed her and said she shouldn't speak to him that way. If it weren't for him, she would never have become the president's secretary, and if he wanted to, he could make sure she was fired by tomorrow. Yan then told her to listen carefully, because if she didn't want him to die, she would have to help him. After a while, So left the office. He dismissed the guards, saying they were free for the day since he was going home and didn't need extra company. However, the men firmly insisted they would escort the president to his home. At that moment, So was stopped by Soli, his secretary, who asked him for a ride home. She explained that her car had broken down and if the president couldn't take her, she would call a taxi. But So said there was no need, he was willing to help and drive her home. So, together with his security team and his secretary, Sue went to her house. At first, Sui didn't understand why he wanted to come inside, but Sui only wanted a glass of water as a gesture of gratitude. The guards also tried to enter, but their leader Grant stopped them, joking that apparently Sue and the girl would be drinking water all night and it wasn't worth distracting them. Inside her house, Sui felt nervous. The place was messy, but Sui reassured her, saying that when he lived in the dormitory, things had looked much worse. He noticed her bra lying on the back of the sofa and teased that she must be putting all her energy into work. Embarrassed, she snatched it from his hands and asked him not to touch her belongings. Soon after, she went to the kitchen to get him some water. But she remembered what Yan had told her. She needed to find a way to be alone with Sue and give him some medicine. Afterward, Sue would faint, and she would have to take a compromising photo of him without clothes. She put the drug into his water and brought it back. At that moment, Sue was looking at the photos hanging on the wall. He asked where her mother was. The girl answered that her mother had already returned to her homeland. Sue picked up the glass of water, but suddenly asked Sue how she was related to Yan. The question startled her, because they shared the same surname. Frightened, she insisted that she had no relation to him, they were just namesakes. Sue didn't press further. He seemed to believe her easily, and drank the water without hesitation. Afterward he prepared to leave. However, the drug hadn't taken effect yet, so Sui stopped him, saying she had a question to consult with him about. Sui paused and replied that it seemed she didn't intend to let him leave that evening. He sat down on the sofa and asked what was going on. Meanwhile, the bodyguards were waiting outside for their boss. Sui sent them a text message, ordering them to cut off the internet in the house. Grant immediately commanded his 3 men to disconnect all incoming cables and shut down the signals from the nearby towers. They reacted instantly, carrying out the instructions. So then asked his secretary what she wanted to discuss, but she stayed silent. The young man quickly realized that she had drugged him, though he wondered if she even knew what kind of drug it was. So asked her if he looked sleepy. Then he concluded that she had probably been deceived into thinking it was a sleeping pill, when in fact it was an aphrodisiac. If she truly didn't know what kind of pill it was, then someone else must have known the truth, and that meant they were both being watched. Sui herself began to wonder why Sui hadn't fallen asleep yet. Her face had changed so much that she thought she might have added too many sleeping pills. At that moment, a hidden camera inside one of the power sockets switched on. Yan and his assistants watched with interest, eager to see what their new president was capable of. Setri approached the young man and noticed he had a fever. She felt he urgently needed to be taken to the hospital, but when Setri got closer to the girl, he almost lost control. He picked up his phone and realized there was no signal, no connection, no internet in the house. Everyone watching grew frustrated because the show they were expecting was about to begin. Suddenly, Sue pushed the girl onto her back. He shouted at her, calling her stupid for not realizing how they intended to use her. Then he quickly stood up, went into another room and told her to bring him some ice. Sue nervously asked what exactly they wanted to use her for. A moment later, one of the bodyguards came into the house and asked where Sue was. The girl replied that he was taking a shower. Grant, the lead bodyguard, smirked, assuming his boss was the kind of man who liked to act fast. Soon after, Sue came out of the bathroom, covered only with a towel. The bodyguard commented that So was still young and didn't understand all the tricks and nuances of how such matters were usually handled. But So ordered him to shut up and focus on the real issue. He told Grant that there was a hidden camera in the room. Grant turned to Soe and asked her threateningly if she was really recording everything in secret. The girl denied it, claiming she knew nothing about any cameras. Sue instructed Grant to search for a hidden video device. He then asked Sue if she knew what kind of drug she had given him. She insisted it was just sleeping pills. Sue pressed her, asking if she really thought a single photo of him without clothes would be enough for their scheme. He revealed that the pill was actually an aphrodisiac, meant to break her down and eventually place her completely under Yan's control. Sakri was shocked, unable to believe it. At that moment, the bodyguard discovered a hidden camera in the socket. The girl panicked, not understanding why they would try to frame her in such a vile way. Sakri told her that her own father was willing to sacrifice her honor for his selfish ambitions. She was stunned. How could her boss know such a thing? He explained that it was only a guess spoken aloud, but her reaction had confirmed it. Finally, Suri confessed that Yan was in fact her father. 15 years ago, he had abandoned her and her sick mother to be with another woman. 3 years ago, she had come here to work, completely alone and desperate. Back then, Yan was already in a mid-level managerial position at the company. He helped her find work, saving her from starvation. Even though she hated him, she couldn't reject him so easily. Grant returned reporting that he had discovered 3 more hidden cameras in the bedroom and 1 in the bathroom. Clearly, someone was planning to drag the president's name through the mud. So asked Sui if she still doubted her father after seeing all of this. She broke down in tears, saying she didn't want to believe it. Perhaps her father had been deceived too. The bodyguard called her stupid, but So stopped him. He declared that he intended to bring down Shan, but to do so he first needed to get close to Yan, and for that he would need Sui's help. If she refused, then he wouldn't be able to count on her strength. After some time, Sue and his bodyguards left. Sui collapsed in tears of despair, not knowing what to do in such a situation. Meanwhile, late at night, the girl stared at the hidden cameras in her house and began recalling her past. She remembered being fired from multiple jobs, constantly treated as useless, and humiliated just for applying. The only person who came to her aid back then was Yan. Because of that, she decided to give him another chance. She was about to enter her father's office when she overheard him talking with some friends. They told him they had met many cruel people in their lives, but Yan was on a completely different level. He had turned his own daughter into a pawn and manipulated her for 3 whole years. Sui realized that her father had specifically ordered the company's executives not to hire her. Only after she became completely desperate did he extend his helping hand. She heard everything and was devastated. Yan's friends asked him if he could show them the hidden camera footage. He replied that he would send people to retrieve the memory cards and then deliver the video to them. At the same time, Suaz was on his way home. Grant asked him why he hadn't gotten rid of Sui since she had betrayed him in the most shameless way. Sui answered that the hardest thing for people was leaving their families. She was just a daughter, why would she betray her father for the sake of her boss? What surprised Sui even more was the fact that even his own secretary had turned out to be one of Chan's pawns. Grant reassured him that there was no need to worry about them because he and his men were